Well, just for a moment, we got just a little bit of time. Look in Proverbs 31 first. And if you have a marker, you can mark both passages. Just some things about the P-31 woman. I want to read it. I'm not going to do a lot of preaching on the P-31 woman except for the comparison to Ruth. And you might think, I have on the outline there, Ruth, a P-31 woman. Well, where did I come up with that? And I want to share with you how I did come up with that. Because in chapter 31, the first verse, it says, the words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. So these things were taught to him by his mother. But the secret is, who is King Lemuel and who is his mother? And there's been some discussions of that. But when he describes a wife in verses 10 through 31, we believe that it's a picture of someone, and I believe it's a picture of Ruth, who we have in the Old Testament. Now, how do I come up with that? Because many folks believe, and that word Lemuel means devoted to God. And in 2 Samuel 12:25, it says that Solomon's name was Jedediah, which means devoted to God. Many folks believe, and a Jewish tradition says, that Lemuel's mother was Bathsheba, which would be Solomon's mother. And she's from the line, if you traced it all the way back, of David's line of Ruth. And many believe that actually Bathsheba was teaching Lemuel, Solomon, what Ruth was like. That she was a godly P-31 woman. And so that's how we're tying it together. And he says, who can find a virtuous wife? It depends on what translation you have. The ESV and the New American Standard Bible said it's excellent. Who can find an excellent wife? And then the NIV says one that has noble character. Noble character. For her worth is far above rubies. And a person who has found a wife and a mother that have these qualities in there have found a very valuable person. We're talking about mothers that self-sacrificed and they were valuable. I'm going to tell you what, folks, they're hard to find. You can flip that coin around too. It's hard to find a husband of noble character. And it goes down, it says, the heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers the field and buys it. From her profits she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out at night. Amen, mothers? Does that light ever go out? No, a lot of those nights get long. This one still has little ones. And you all remember those nights when they don't sleep. And even sometimes when you first get them, they don't come with a sleep pattern, some of them. Some of them decide that they like to stay up all night and sleep all day, which that doesn't work in a mother's schedule usually either, but that's the way it is. And she stretches out her hands to the distaff, and that was a staff that they used to spin flax into thread. And her hands hold the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow. She's not afraid because she shovels, right? No, that doesn't work. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. She doesn't worry about it because she makes the clothing for her children. What's going to go on to say, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. And here's our memory verse. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own good works praise her in the gates. Then if you would turn over to Ruth. Now Ruth's right after, right before 1st and 2nd Samuel, right after Judges. It's a little book tucked in there, 4 chapters. It's written during the time of the Judges, Ruth is. And I just want to show you 8 character traits in Ruth's life that we just read about in Proverbs. And we won't flip back and forth for time's sake. You can do that. I put the verses there. But the first one is that she was devoted to her family. We heard that about from everyone today, that the mom was devoted to her family. You know, for years, I hardly ever heard of a mother leaving her children to the husband and running off. Now, I have heard a little bit more about that in the last few years, but it used to be, guess who always left? It was Dad. They got interest elsewhere and run off. And then moms were left there alone. But this lady is devoted to her family. Now remember, they move into where the Moabites are, and Naomi's husband, Ruth's mom, dies. And then the 2 sons die. So they're left with, Naomi's left with 2 daughter-in-laws. And so she's looking out at them and she's telling them the best thing for you to do is do what? Go home and find you a new husband. Because she says, I'm not having any more kids. And if I did have one, by the time I raised them, they'd be too old. So there we are. And so in Ruth chapter 1, verse 15, it says, and she said, look, your sister-in-law, this is Naomi speaking, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But, and there's one of those but verses, but Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you, for wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. You will be my people, and I will be, and your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. So this is a family. Ruth was dedicated to her mother-in-law, right? She said, I don't care, I'm sticking with you until, guess what? Until you're dead. That's quite a commitment. Knowing that, guess what? Who's taking care of these people? There's no one there to take care of her. It's not like us. Today we don't have anything in play. Only thing, God does have a system, which we'll tap into in just a moment. But she was devoted to her family. She is noted for her commitment and expression of that she married into, and loyalty to her husband. And that's in the Proverbs 31 woman. It says that her husband can trust her. No matter what, he wasn't concerned about her. Matter of fact, because of her prosperity and her character, guess what? It just excelled his position and his character. Made it all easier to fulfill the responsibilities that he had. She was devoted to her family. That's a godly mother. Delighted in her work. Now, my mom, for a lot of years, she had 6 kids. That's enough work for anybody, right? 1 kid's pretty tough. 2, but then later on in the year, she worked for a little while to help things out. And I still don't know how she ever got everything done. Shirley did the same thing. She worked for a while a lot of whiles, when we were raising hers and mine. We were raising kids, and there's just not enough money to go around, so Mom goes to work. And matter of fact, it was a blessing of that, where she worked at Newberry's and Three Rivers, that I come to know the Lord. So He uses those things. And matter of fact, that's where we both came to know the Lord. But anyhow, through the witness of Jerry Foster and a fellow that he led to the Lord, Mr. Jim Kosler. And we see that witness there. And so Shirley and I came to know the Lord through that. And she delights in her work. Chapter 2 and verse 2 there in Ruth says, "So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, 'Please let me go to the field.'" They went back now to the hometown of Naomi. And she says, they've moved into a house. And verse 2 says, "Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, 'Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor.' She said to her, 'Go, my daughter.'" Please let me go to work so we have something what? To eat. She says, "I don't mind. I'll go work with my hands." Now, in the Old Testament, the way they did this is when they gleaned the fields, when they were harvesting the fields, they would leave the edges. Those were for the orphans, for the widows, so they could get some food. Of course, God's got this all under control, right? She's going to go out and work in the field and glean with her hands the grain so they can eat. So she willingly, and then in Proverbs it says that the P-31 woman willingly works with her hands. And she was making clothing, she's buying and selling, she's doing whatever it takes to get her family to prosper. And that's exactly what Ruth was. She was delighted in her work. Number 3, she's diligent in her labor. Now moms will understand this. Chapter 2, verse 7. "And she said, 'Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves.' So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house." And then in verse 17, it says, "So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley." And then in verse, should I get you the right verse there, verse 23. "So she stayed close by the young woman of Boaz to glean until the end of barley harvest." So she's going to work from morning to evening for about 2 months straight. 2 months straight, not easy work. Hard, laborious work. She's picking it up, she's beating it out, and then they had to grind it and all those things to eat. So she was diligent in her labor. And it tells us in Proverbs that the light doesn't go out at night early. She's up all night long, taking care of family, taking care of things. And I say kids, but then wives take care of husbands often too, right? Because a lot of times husbands are just big babies, right? And they get sick and got to be taken care of. And so anyhow, and I'm going to give you these next couple. I don't want to take you all past time here. Dedicated to godly speech in chapter 2 and verse 10, when she talks to Boaz, her future husband, who is 10 to 15 years older than her. I remember Boaz is raised at the same time that Naomi, which is the mother-in-law. It's about that kind of age. She's in the family line of there. And so she's talking to him in chapter 2, verse 10. "So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, 'Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?'" So if you check out the rest of those verses later, you see that she speaks very gracefully, very humbly. She is a foreigner. She's a Moabitess. And they weren't included in the Jewish promises. And so she's an outsider, but she talks very nicely. She doesn't have any idea who Boaz is. She does not know that he's the second closest relative, which will be her kinsman redeemer. And then they'll marry, and then Jesse comes, and then And then Obed comes, then Jesse comes, then guess out of that we get David. So anyhow, she doesn't know all of that stuff. We read that. But she speaks with godly speech. And then number 5, she's very dependent on God. Verse 12, the Lord repay your work in full reward by giving you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. And we see as we go along that she is dedicated. She said, your God will be what? My God. And she turns away from the worship of many gods as the Moabites would do. And so she's very dependent on God. The Proverbs 31 woman says the same thing. She is a woman who what? Fears the Lord. Very godly. Number 6, in Ruth chapter 3, real quick like here, we have in verse 3, it says, therefore wash yourself. Naomi's telling her how to present herself to Boaz to see if he would redeem her or to marry her. And they had customs which are a little different than ours. But it says she dresses here in verse 3, therefore wash yourself and anoint yourself. That's really nice. That's really good. Be clean, right? And put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. So she waits till night. She slips down at the bottom by his feet. And Boaz, after a while, says, who is that down there at my feet? But she dressed with care. And she put on her best apparel. The P-31 woman says she's dressed in purple garments. Silk and purple garments, that very expensive. And she's worked hard to dress with care. She's discreet with men, chapter 3, verse 6. And we won't give you the whole story. She went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And you can read the rest later, but she's very discreet. Ruth demonstrated moral excellence. She did not engage in sexual immorality. She did not remarry outside the family. And she had appealed for a levirate redemption to an older godly man. And it says that the P-31, her husband trusted her, and he does good things for her. So he didn't worry about her running around. Ruth was not a run-around kind of woman. She is dedicated to her mother-in-law, to working, and if God provided through this method a husband, which he did, praise God for it. So she is discreet with men. She wasn't a floozy. And the last one, we have delivered a blessing. In chapter 4, verse 14, it says, then the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. And then in Proverbs it says, her children and husband praise her, and a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. She is an avenue of blessing. It tells us in Proverbs, he who finds a wife finds a what? A good thing. Jim's not found a... Yeah, you want to repeat that for us, Jim? No, that's all right. And I can say that the Lord has used my wife as an avenue of blessing to me and to her children, right? And that's the kind of Ruth was. And that's why it says in Proverbs 31:28, her children rise up and call her what? Blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. So that's our thing. Remember, praise your wife and thank her for the good mother she's been. And then also, don't forget to tell Mom, thank you for all that dedication that my mom gave for me. And Jim, I kind of was out of the same mold as my dad was. I was not the best of kids. I disrespected my mom, but I did about everything else you can think of. And but my mom still what? She still loved me. She never cast me out. She still worked hard to take care of me. Even though I left home early, But she's still my mom. I love her, and I'm so thankful for her. And she needs to come and know the Lord. And that's my hope, that I'll even get a chance to talk to her today on Mother's Day about her salvation. And